Yo, 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 what is going on, COD Familia? It is your boy B, and today we are going to be taking a look at the Gen 4 pool that's going in to KvK. They are currently in pre-war. Registration has not started, and we're going to show you all the kingdoms. I'm going to show you some stats on their current top 300 power. We'll show you what their activity status is, who's the top alliance there, and or just the king or queen alliance, and then talk about what does this mean for the KvK groups going forward, because I do think that there is some interesting things here, especially with the numbers being and seemingly to be a little bit lower than what we typically see on average. As always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you throw us up because it helps out a lot. So let's start by just identifying who are those groups, or I should say who are the kingdoms that are going to be going into that group. So keep in mind, right, if you're pre-strife or you're seasoned strife, you are effectively going into the same KvK pool. In this case, you can see here from kingdom 300 all the way up, and then even 104, it'll do a little reset, and then up to 372 for the kingdoms that are in here. Pre-strife, we go to pre-war, all the kingdoms here, and it looks like they might have actually added a few more here, maybe. I'd have to double check my list, but then we can go ahead and look at some numbers. Now, one of the thing is I went to go and check, I think in Kingdom 104, as I mentioned, registration hasn't started yet. They don't have an end of season timeline. Migration is open for these kingdoms. And there's kind of, I guess, a different element here, which is one, or I guess an additional one, I should say, is that these kingdoms are essentially ripe right now for migration. And you're going to see that from a number of these kingdoms that could arguably be considered dead kingdoms that are primed to go ahead and migrate to. And a number of alliances and players have already started doing that, whether it's a rebuild, if it's joining a kingdom, if it's some going in just to try and essentially establish themselves, and then maybe bring in, if it's smaller, medium, or larger sized groups. So there's already been a handful of them that have started to move. Okay, let's get into the deets now, which is going to be our Diana. So, as I said, nothing has started yet here. Where are we currently? Well, this is, let me see if I can increase it. I'm already at 20. Okay. So these are all the kingdoms that are in that pool at the moment. We have 53 kingdoms involved. 36 of them have a king or queen, meaning that they could actually register and not just go into an auto skip. Unless, remember, if you've skipped 3 times, then the next one you will get put in. So obviously, I don't think that information is shown. So it's not as though we can click on a kingdom and see, oh, well, they have 1 skip left, 2 skips left. That would be great to see, but we don't have that information publicly. Given that, you have about 68% of the kingdoms right now out of the entire pool that could register. 36 is actually not necessarily a bad number to work with, because if you think about it, and you could have 6 groups, you put 6 kingdoms in. If everyone registers for Dragonfall, which is probably unlikely that you're going to get up to everyone that does, just based on what we've seen from Gen 2 and Gen 3, and even a little bit of Gen 1, right? So, and then you have to think about, okay, well, what if you want 8? Okay, well, let's say 4 kingdoms don't register and you end up with 32. Okay, that's not bad. You could do 4 KvKs, 8 kingdoms apiece. You got 4 zones, 2 kingdoms per zone. Okay, the numbers kind of line up. However, we won't know that until the registration period starts and we see how that works. When we look at the numbers for the kingdoms themselves, right? So these are activity statuses. Again, this was pulled on, I think, statuses and alliances I did yesterday. The data is from 2.6, so about 2.5 days ago. Things have changed in some of these kingdoms. And again, we'll probably do another data pool on this when I speak to Fuzzy. I have to get him the nut for the kingdoms once we figure out everyone who has registered. But at least for the kingdoms that have a king or queen, right? That is the important thing, is we need to see who registers for Dragonfall, because anyone who doesn't register is either going to skip or they may still get placed only if they've already skipped 3 times. So once we figure out everyone that's registered, we'll have a better idea, and also looking at some updated numbers. But prior to registration, this is what the numbers look like. And I'll just kind of go through each of the kingdoms. You could see, right, there's no one that's actually full in this group. The most really we have is crowded, and then we'll take a look at kind of who's at the top of the range, at least as of about 2.5 days ago. So here you go. So at the moment, you got Kingdom 276, a KOV, right? They were at about 18.8, almost 19 billion power, 14 BS from 191, 14 bill And then you got 3 here at 10 bill, which is actually pretty nice given how close they are. 300, 151, 359 with ASI, RGU, and AOS. And then we end up getting a few others. So you got unit here from 316, 8.6, 342, OR 8.1, 161, GDW 7.9, 7.8 for BXS at 164. And you can see here, right, with kind of an indicator, right, for some of those rebuilds. 363, we already knew. I think ESG was going there. BXS opted for 164. I think there's a couple others too as well. I think 176, this might be one. And there's a few others, right? One of the easiest ways is I can just kind of, I can look at my data where all the big players have moved. And I can kind of just like look at what new kingdom they're in. Same thing with alliances, right? The one thing that I find very interesting, like we did last time, I might do another big migration thing. Maybe towards the end, I know people really enjoyed that when we were kind of like looking at, well, where's everyone going this season, right, during the migration window. So I think that's something that we're keeping an eye on. And I'll probably be compiling something to maybe do a bigger video to talk about, hey, here's all the moves that have happened. And if you'd like to see that, let me know. As we work our way down, you can see the power ranges. And I think this to me is what is really interesting is, again, you look at some of the kingdoms that are, a little bit more at the bottom, like these kingdoms don't have a lot of power. These are kind of prime, deadish, low activity, rebuild kingdoms that you could go in, right? If it's kind of a billion power and less, especially some of these, right? 406, 418, 408, these ones that are under 500 mil, right? Where that's the top alliance. Doesn't mean that it's total power, but the top alliance at the time, right? Unless they're maybe hiding the power and it's distributed otherwise, but usually that's not the case. So you have a lot that are under a mil. You got a couple between 1 and 2, a couple at 2s, a couple at 3s, and then you start seeing, really I would say probably at like the 8s and 10s. And again, this is pretty disparaging when you think about it, right? Like you don't have a lot of kingdoms that are around 18. So this is obviously big. The top 2 kingdoms are really kind of a cut above, at least with separation. And again, we'll have to see how everything looks once migration ends, because the numbers could still be pretty different at that point. But usually when you're going into a KvK pool, you typically want to see powers be somewhat close. And like I said, I like these 10s here. I think that's nice. The 7s and 8s, there's no 9s though, right? So that's something to consider. You only got 1 6, 1 5, a couple 4s, right? So it's like the range between 10 and probably 3 or 4, probably a little wider than we might like to see. But again, right, maybe migration will help that once that period ends up finishing. So that's just something to look forward to, right? Again, we'll have to wait until that happens. And then once we do get a better look at that, right, maybe the numbers will be a little better. I guess I'll say at this point, I think one of the things I'd like to try and do once this finishes, actually just came to me too, because I know I've been talking about this for a while, is I want to do like some team up predictions. So once migration finishes, once we know who's registered, I want to try and pull the data again and then basically do, hey, here's the teams that I think, right? Here's the kingdoms I think that would be the best team ups that they could do, where maybe we can get the most balanced matchups that could be possible. However, what I would like to hear as well from those of you that are in this KvK, I will say this, it's interesting compared to the first like 2 gens, where in Gen 3 and now Gen 4, it almost feels as though a number of the kingdoms that are becoming, some of them I'll say, are becoming high participants are rebuild kingdoms, or basically people that are leaning out and they're migrating to a previous or like a past gen. And that to me is super interesting, because when you think about that, even if you don't skip, obviously skipping is free in a sense, right? Because you don't have to migrate the players, but you're having people that are Gen 1, Gen 2, and they're basically just saying, well, okay, we're just going to skip to whatever, because you have to think about, like, when those kingdoms are coming in, you can have Gen 1 and Gen 2 players and alliances move essentially to Gen 4, right? Which is open right now. And again, if you're willing to pay the migration cost, right, it's one way that you can kind of get to those kingdoms. But at the same time, right, you're probably trying to rebuild and get to these dead kingdoms, so that way you can lean and thin out, as we've been seeing from a number of alliances and kingdoms. So I guess it is just interesting. It's like a different element. But I'd be curious to know, right, what do you think about this for those of you that are in this pool? Do you have any thoughts? Do you maybe just want to wait and see how the numbers look once registration or once the migration period ends, and then you get to see who's going to register? Or do you think, man, this is a little rough, I wish the pool was a bit bigger? Right? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. That's going to do it for me on this one. A little bit shorter. As always, hope you enjoy. Until next time, we'll catch you later.